I would put music and some audio cues in this intro, but I don't have any. Sorry.
Warning, if you have not seen whatever it is that I'm reviewing, this video may contain spoilers of key events. You'll have to consider this before watching the rest of the review. You have been warned.
For every anime I hold to a high regard, there's always going to be something that distinguishes it towards excellence that defines each work as something more than just another piece of animation. A milestone, one could call them. Chobits is my personal milestone for romantic comedy anime, Steins Gate is my personal milestone for character-driven anime, Madoka Magica is my personal milestone for magical girl anime, and it goes on from there. You're bound to experience efforts that define your own expectations, the standards that determine what you consider to be good or bad, and as an anime fan, they are fairly numerous. However, that wasn't really the case at first. I remember coming off the heels of Chobits back in 2009, watching a number of series virtually at random, notably Murder Princess, Ichigo Mashimaro, Kobato, Eden of the East, Elfen Lied, School Days, Narima Daikon Brothers, and others in my post-Chobits phase as an anime drifter. If I heard about it somewhere and it interested me, I'll go watch it, regardless of whether it was any good or not. Then, while finding my next foray into Japanese animation, I came across clips of a little show you might have heard of called Higurashi no Nakukoroni, which was an adaptation of something called a sound novel or something. I didn't care about that stuff at the time. I just became curious as to what the context of all these sadistic clips of characters being tortured or killed were. And after watching the series for the first time, I found my personal milestone for horror mystery anime. Directed by Chiaki Kon, the first episode of Higurashi starts off with Keiichi Maebara, a teenager who moved to Hinamizawa with his parents and enjoys the innocent and happy days with his group of friends consisting of Rena Ryugu, Mion Sonozaki, Rika Furude, and Satoko Hojo. And though that sounds like something that can make for one hell of a generic slice of life, that's only because it could have, if it wasn't meant to deceive you. Yes, deception is a common occurrence in Higurashi, and as plot events come and more characters like Mion's twin sister Shion are introduced, you begin to realize that what was shown to us before is not what it's about. We witness Keiichi fall into intense paranoia that ends with him killing the friends he held dear and himself, only for the anime to reset everything in the next episode with a new story arc and a refresh in tone. The first clue that there is more going on than Rika going Nipa. A series of questions and answers now begins with the newly acquired expectation that there is a secret to Hinamizawa that might be the result of a curse by Oyashiro. The village is God. But alas, nothing is quite straightforward in this ambiguity-riddled world of Higurashi. So within a setting that loops for a mysterious reason, will our characters rise above the conflicts that drag them towards malice and misfortune? The first season of Higurashi no Nakukoroni was unlike any other show or any other narrative in general that I had seen up until that point. It's easy to let go of it as some dumb, light-hearted fun in the first or even second episode, but through patience, it all opens up and you see that it was all a mask. Matter of fact, almost everything about Higurashi wears a mask. From the plot lines, to the seemingly peaceful setting of Hinamizawa, to the characters whom we get to know, there's going to be some kind of mask that cloaks the shadows that lie at the anime's core. From Rena's joyful and bubbly personality being a mask for her haunted, troubled, and highly paranoid self, Mion's tomboyish personality being a mask for a self that might be hiding some potentially disturbing secrets, Satoko's troublemaking and energetic personality being a mask for a self that's troubled by the loss of her parents and older brother, abuse from her uncle, and loads of self-loathing, and Shion? Well, Shion is just a full-on mental wreck under her mask due to her family. Even Keiichi, whom you think would be an upbeat knight in shining armor, wears his charisma and optimism over a self that is just as twisted as the rest. And don't even get me started on Rika. Who the hell knows what's going on with Rika, judging purely by the first season. The fact that the show's true colors are as hidden as they are truly highlights that juxtaposition isn't always a bad thing. If anything, Higurashi implements juxtaposition admirably with genuine deceit to any potential viewer's expectations and absolutely benefits from such tonal differences, mainly because of the show's subject matter, which I'll talk about in a bit, which also fits in with the questions and answers dynamic that it has going on. Higurashi no Nakukoroni's overarching structure is both set into question arcs, story arcs that present any number of different questions for any given scenario, and answer arcs, story arcs that present answers or solutions to conflicts. For example, the fourth story arc, Meakashi-hen, depicts the same scenario as the second story arc, Watanagashi-hen, this time from Shion's perspective as to give us insight into her motivations for the events that transpired and answers the questions that were presented. This format is what comes to separate Higurashi from the usual rank-and-file mystery stories as you watch all of these things go on and formulate probable conclusions based on what is shown, and then compare your own interpretations to the anime's answers. And that's where a lot of the engagement can stem from, comparing your own answers to the true answers and seeing how close or distant they may be, and considering Higurashi's affinity for mind-bending twists, I was caught with my pants down upon a first viewing, and it was amazing. Granted, that's not to say Higurashi doesn't have its own share of plot holes, particularly in the Tatari Goroshi-hen story arc. Some questions are left to be explained during the first season's 26 episode span, but I think this has more to do with Studio Dean's adaptation process, as I've heard these same plot holes are actually solved in the source material. Even so, they aren't big, and in some cases, these omissions can actually add to the mind games the show throws at the viewer. It's not a perfect mystery, but by all means, it is a mental roller coaster nonetheless. But mystery is not the only element it has going for it, not by a long shot. When we think about the horror genre, we usually think of gloomy places with lots of darkness, a monster, some eerie sound design or what have you, blah blah blah, and BAM! You got something that might be classified as contemporary horror. Horror plays a big part in Higurashi no Nakukoroni, but it's not the usual kind we associate with. One could even say that the horror the anime revolves around is of a heavier variety, as instead of indirectly dealing with a topic, it dives headfirst into the subject of human nature. Mistrust is a central theme in Higurashi, and is used in numerous ways in just about every scenario, which hints that there might be more to all the craziness than what appears on the surface, but we never truly know what it is in season 1. Higurashi definitely hits hard in this aspect by delving into futility, and usually ends with the characters committing horrible acts toward each other or themselves, and maybe some pure tragedy thrown in for good measure. From one to another, we are presented dilemmas that could push them towards a crossroad, a conflict they must solve, but their efforts, no matter what they do, is thwarted by mistrust and hatred. Whether it be Keiichi's initiative to uncover suspected hidden intentions from those he calls his friends, or wanting to save Satoko from her abusive uncle, to Shion's strive to uncover the truth about Satoko's brother's disappearance, and others, each scenario crumbles when these characters cease knowing who to trust, who to blame, or fail to believe warnings of potential calamity, and take off the masks they embody to become someone else, someone who might just be who they really are, with context serving to hammer in the true severity of the fundamental flaws that Keiichi and company have. A lot of it is even interconnected in some fashion. Satoko blames herself for the disappearance of her older brother Satoshi by being overly reliant on him, and sees her abusive uncle as a mandatory test of strength, even if refusing to seek help from others and taking all the pain is probably making her a worse person. Shion seeks the truth about Satoshi's fate that leads her to murdering anyone she thinks is responsible, including her own sister and friends, all in the name of love. Rena faces her own dilemma of saving her father from being exploited by Satoko's uncle and his mistress by killing them, and gradually loses touch of her friends through paranoia of her actions and her fear of Oyashiro's curse. And even Keiichi, the guy who's supposed to be the middleman of the show's mystery, has his own self-doubt about just how much he can trust anyone close to him, and in the arcs where he sets himself up to help people, his attempts at doing so are ultimately for naught. These are complicated scenarios which push the values, anxieties, and morality of the cast that reveal the core of their beings. The fact that each character's problems are connected through friendship and other existential elements like the connection between Satoko's self-loathing and Shion's love for Satoshi only adds to the complexity and makes each character's self-destruction even more powerful and tragic. The deaths rack up and the relative confusion reaches sky high. Higurashi, for all its blood-stained sensibilities, explores something we can all fear: the inability to change anything. What is scarier to us than the thought of not being able to do anything? To change an established destiny for ourselves or for others? To have absolutely no free will over our own lives, our own destinations, or the fates of those we cherish. And though the method of exploring this innate feeling isn't exactly subtle, it's not supposed to be subtle. It's meant to be gruesome, raw, and warped, with facial expressions and twisted off modeling that fit the absolutely sloppy savageness of the anime's inhumanity, punctuated with a stellar atmospheric soundtrack and a virtually impeccable voice cast that both deceive you with peace when the sun shines and horrify you with their insanity when the happiness is replaced with dread, thanks in part to all the disturbing laughter. This show is probably an example where the lack of overall visual polish actually augments the experience of watching something, whether intentional or not. The inconsistent art quality of the environments making the setting of Hinamizawa even more unfamiliar than it already was. And an unfamiliar place comes unfamiliar, blurry, cute, maniacal faces. I know, the character design is kinda schizo like that, just like Rena. It's easy to joke about how over the top the crazy character faces can be, and you know what? I agree that they are hilarious out of context, but that all changes in motion, when the sound kicks in and the voice acting roars with all its uncontrollable sadism, and suddenly, what was a negative turns into a positive, which is how I would describe the presentation as a whole. One aspect helps another, from subpar art quality helping the setting feel more alien, to the voice acting helping the odd character design directions come to life in all their sugary or fucked up glory. It all provides an additional level of horrific tangibility to Higarashi's themes in spades. This world is not safe, and anyone, no matter how good they may be, can be a monster. The characters, the insight, the conflict, the complications, the doubt, the tension that only builds and builds and builds! Hearts race, and when the balloon reaches its limit and inevitably pops in a loud, startling rush of air that scatters around our own little world, there is only silence. A long, haunting silence that allows retrospection and makes us regret the terrible decisions we've made. The decisions we might be doomed to make. Higurashi is not an amazing horror anime based purely on dimming the lights, adding little sound effects, and having something pop out in front of us. Higurashi is amazing because of its methodical technique of displaying the brutality of humanity's darkest hours, the side we fear. It shows us how we can tear each other apart, while acknowledging that we are a tiny part of an existence that will continue without us, no matter what we do. The helplessness and the worries that comes from thinking that we and our actions do not matter in this world. The true terror of the human experience. And yet, on the other side of the coin, Higurashi argues that it's only feared when we allow ourselves to fear it, to put ourselves in the position to fear it. No matter the carnage and the sadness, though Keiichi and company are never safe from their own dark sides, that doesn't mean they should always be doomed to let it become who they are without objection. A balance exists where, despite the worst traits of almost all of our cast, the show acknowledges that the worst qualities of human nature are never something that's impossible to overcome. And instead of preaching it with constant words that are certain to never fail, we get this through the actions of characters undergoing harsh trials full of curiosity or good intentions, even if it means succumbing to their inner demons more times than not. In other words, instead of taking the exact same tired, one-sided approach by saying, "I will never give up," Higurashi has the brains to accept that defeat is always possible, but knows that we can't always lose by saying, "I will not give up if I can help it." So while our characters do repeatedly lose, there might still be a way to end the suffering, to find the best outcome. It just won't be easy. At all. Keep in mind that none of our main characters are evil people, just highly vulnerable, psychologically pained, and flawed underneath the masks they wear and have something to atone for. And an overarching question of these characters, or indeed the Higurashi series, is whether or not they can pull through all the hatred and mistrust in order to overcome personal adversity and create a better future. It makes for an edge-of-your-seat experience that provides mystery, thrills, intensity, and opportunities of self-reflection without becoming this highly unlikable husk that lacks a genuine sense of humanity and nails just about everything it sets out to do if you watch it in Japanese.
I won!
Really? Really? Okay, not to say it's all bad. I kinda like Melalia's Rena. Unlike the others, she managed to maintain plenty of the character's traits in translation, even if there are times where both this and her performance as Rin Tosaka start blurring together. However, you'd think they could have done better than casting Grant George as Keiichi for an anime that emphasizes atmosphere and tension, something that's hard to do when he makes the character sound almost like Sonic the Hedgehog. I always expected him to say, "You're too slow." Then again, this is the same dude who's capable of taking potentially intimidating lines and turning them into unintentionally creepy knee slappers.
How I'd pin you down and force you to swallow it. I'd shove so much down your throat you'd look pregnant.
Overall, the first season of Higurashi no Nakukoro ni is easily one of those TV animes that comes around to show others of its kind how it's done with aplomb. Steeped in sunshine when it's happy-go-lucky fun time, and shrouded in grit when shit hits the fan. You just don't get many experiences quite like this on a constant basis. Where something like the previously reviewed Kamisama no Memocho tried to have its cake and eat it by compromising on atmosphere and ambiguity to be a number of different genres, even if it underpowered the core mystery element, and where another just couldn't stop being another. Higurashi is what both shows wanted to be, but weren't. Focused, highly tense, ambiguous, shocking, intellectually demanding, twisted, unpredictable, but has enough optimism to have a heart. To have a soul under all the blood, almost like the characters we follow. If you've not seen this series, I highly recommend starting with this. However, keep in mind that this review primarily covers the first season, and though some of the points I've expressed could apply to the second season, I wanted to focus on the beginning. Thus, this is part 1 of 2 in my review of the Higurashi no Nakukoro ni anime series. I shall cover the sequel, Higurashi no Nakukoro ni Kai, in a separate video after I finish rewatching it, as despite following the events of its prequel, it takes a different direction that I think warrants its own video, yet connected enough to be a part of one whole experience. Until then, you can't go wrong with this.